Cheers, everybody, and welcome to your favorite late Friday night hashcast. This is episode 12 of Variables. I am one of your hosts, Frigoli, also Superior Buds and Pedro's Grow Room down there. Tonight is our guest, Matthew Gates of Zenthanol Consulting, known as Zenthanol on YouTube and Synchangel on Instagram. He is a master of pets, a bug connoisseur, IPM expert, someone that we all want to know, but don't want to know too closely, if you know what I mean. Welcome, Matt. Welcome to Variables.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome, man.
Welcome. I'm excited for this one. This is like we were saying before the show. This is something I don't have a lot of experience in. So hopefully I have a bunch of questions for you.
It's one of those things that a lot of us don't have experience in until we're kind of forced into it. You know what I mean? I real quick before the show ran and collected some bottles I've recently used. I'm just gonna go ahead and jump right into this. Okay, so here's my problem, Matt. I'm more of a chemistry and physics type of guy. So when it comes to biology and Latin, that all just went out the window for me, like Bio 101. So I'm going to try to pronounce some of these things, and you're going to have to help me probably the entire way. Hypoapsis miles.
You're pretty close. I mean, if you're depends on how much Latin you're gonna try to put into it.
Yeah, I have zero, but let's do it. Let's do it correct.
Miles, hypoapsis miles, perhaps some might say.
Okay.
Some incredibly pedantic people might pronounce it that way. People like me, but yeah, that gets the thought across.
These are some of my favorite bugs right there.
I mean, honestly, one of the most common I've ever used in my garden. Another one, Dalotia atheta coriaria, the rove beetle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nice focus on that camera.
Well, Logitech, I guess I can shout that out.
Once in a while it works with us.
And then in tandem with that, I use usually just a triple blend of nematodes. What is it? HB, HC, and SF or something? Can you? I'm not even going to try to remember those off the top of my head.
So, yeah, I know off the top of my head. So that's Heterohabditis. It's HB, Bacteriophora. So Heterohabditis Bacteriophora and Steinernema feltiae, SF.
Oh my gosh, I was that quick with that SF one. Right? Say that one more.
It's like casting a magic spell, right?
Yeah, you just need a wand.
Yeah,
the entire show.
Should try to get in the next Harry Potter movie or something. But yeah, so that's so SF is Steinernema or Steinernema feltiae. Is how I pronounce it. And then the HB one is Heterohabditis actually, Bacteriophora. Yeah.
So all that being said, in the last week, I would have dropped 500 of those rove beetles, 25,000 of the predator mites, and I think it was 50 million of the nematodes. This is entirely all for preventative measures, because I think that's the best way to approach pests in your garden. But I do have what I'll call a fungus gnat infestation. And fungus gnat is one of those, in my opinion, the lowest grade pests you can have in your cannabis indoor garden, because it seemingly does the least amount of damage. But I don't like looking at them. I don't like seeing them flying around and getting shot through my fans into the wall and, just on my soil or whatever, wherever they're at.
Definitely one of the most annoying for me.
Yeah. So I drop about, what is it? $100, $120 or so a month on just an IPM regimen. My guess, and tell me if I'm wrong, that's probably not what the common IPM looks like in your experience when it comes to cannabis gardening, right? What are people out there in your experience doing to kind of support the either the overall health of their gardens, or let's do that. Let's come at it from a preventative perspective right now. Say we got a nice clean garden, but we're worried maybe the seasons are changing, or maybe we know some friends that got some spider mites or something like that, and we just want an overall general approach to maybe combating bugs before they even get there. What would be your recommendations? And my guess is something like starting with, I don't know, clean clothes.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think you were kind of going somewhere with that first line of questioning that I thought might
Take
terminate
it.
a different way. But let me take it that way. Yeah. Well, like what you said earlier, and what you said now echoed. You don't. I don't normally see a lot of people thinking preventatively, right? The In the physical security world, it's very similar, right? Where like people often don't pay until after they get robbed. They think, I'm not going to get robbed. It's fine. Why would it happen to me? I don't think it'll happen to me for whatever reason. And then it happens to them. And they're like, oh man, I really don't like that I lost like many thousands of dollars if it's a business or whatever, you know. So that mentality of just being vigilant and being just thinking in that mindset, that preventive mindset, um, I do agree it is superior. It is superior, and like it. A lot of things are resource based, of course, and IPM is no different. So depending on your situation, your context, right, and your resources that you have, you might have an easier or tougher time of certain kinds of pests, right? So it does depend a lot on what you can bring to bear. But for me, with IPM, my general recommendation, step 0, I would say, is learning what pests you could have potentially, right? So for various crops, this is going to be different. For cannabis, the more information that you have, admittedly, a lot of information that's empirical is lacking, right? That's focused specifically on cannabis, but as much as that you can bring, the better you're going to know, especially localized information. Like maybe you live in Michigan or Massachusetts, or you live where I live in Southern California. Those are going to be very different. Outdoor, indoor, yeah.
So I mean, obviously outdoor things are just a whole different story. But in terms of indoor gardening, maybe let's start with where you're at. What are the most common pests that you see?
I feel like that definitely changes a lot. I wrote a Skunk Magazine article a little while ago about how budworm moths were a huge problem for a lot of people I talked to, both clients and just people on social media and that kind of a thing. So they've been around for a long time. The corn earworm, as it's known in agriculture generally, and there's other budworms out there too. But Helicoverpa zea, um, that one in particular is a huge issue up and down California, South America too.
Indoors too?
And no, sorry, you were talking about indoor, but I was thinking about what I heard generally. But yeah, no, not indoor, not indoor.
Okay, I was
No.
gonna say, man, that's
Sorry.
kind of
I'm glad
terrifying
that
if
you
you start seeing
clarified
those
that.
indoors.
Yeah,
We might
no,
have some
no.
holes in some walls we need to take care of or something.
Yeah, seriously.
No,
So
yeah, what?
greenhouses, though, I would say greenhouses still got hit more often than you might think, but
Okay.
I think a lot of people don't patch those holes. Speaking of which, but for indoor, I think the most common one might be fungus gnats, like you say,
Yeah,
and I would also agree that it's a somewhat low threat, although it can vector pathogens that you wouldn't want,
for
and that
sure.
can be much more traumatic and problematic. But like I said recently on the Cheap Home Grow podcast, and Steve Spartans in the comments, it's hard to put your forensics cap on and really know, like, oh, did the fungus gnats transmit it? Like, I know research says that can happen and has been shown to happen, but did that happen here and now, or was it something else? It's very hard for you to
Oh,
really
there's
analyze
so
that
many
and know for
variables.
sure. Yeah, yeah. But maybe there's a correlation. Almost every fungus gnats, you have fungus gnats, and then there's a higher incidence. Maybe it's more likely. So that's why also recording your information is super important if you can do that, and especially in a way where it's where you can like visualize some data. That's more of a commercial thing usually, but more and more people can get like apps and things that show them that data over time. Like, I got this many bugs this week, and then next week it's more or less, and maybe I can be like, oh, I put this treatment here, and I saw the population went down, so maybe there's a relationship there.
So Superior Buds in one of our earlier episodes brought up someone that was using an AI or maybe creating an AI tool to track trichome coverage. I'm wondering if that's something similar that's being utilized to do the same with, like what you're saying, Matt, with bugs, because I can't imagine getting down and peering into the soil and just staring and trying to count, okay, maybe I've got 7 fungus gnats today, and maybe the next day it's 5, and maybe the next day it's 12, and just recording like that type of I mean, I get it, I get the value in that, but I'm more like I see it or I don't kind of guy.
Sure. Yeah.
So what kind of like how like other than the number of bugs, what kind of data is valuable there to actually record? I mean, I know all data is valuable, and listen, this guy over here, he's got a lot of data. He's a big data guy,
Big time.
and I have been. I go back and forth with it, but sometimes I just get the information, and I'm like, okay, let's just let's settle with that for now. But collecting it for the purpose of IPM and watching bugs, and what else can we look for other than just, oh god, that's a lot of bugs.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I often recommend that people don't adopt like a numerical point scale for a lot of pests for the reason you just mentioned. It's just complicated to do that. But other data, so presence absence, like you're talking about, it's kind of like the really important thing is getting a good sample. So like, and a lot of these people who are watching, I think, are home growers. So I'll if you've only got like 6 plants, it's a lot easier than 600, 6,000. Right. But generally, like, if you are, so sometimes it's like not going to be a census, right? You're not going to have 100% census. You're going to have some proportion of the sample, and then each time you look at a plant, or maybe the way that I've worked in other greenhouses and in cannabis and also other crops, sometimes they don't really care about individual plants as much as they care about like this plant load, this like 1 meter square of foliage, like in Gerbera, for example. So, but regardless, you want to be looking for all the potential pests that you're at least most concerned with, and then where they might be on the plant, right? So the leaves, the stem, the roots, if possible, like for rice root aphid, which would be my number 2 example of like pests that are significantly worse than fungus gnats.
Okay, so
Very
that's like
common.
number 2. And wait, number 2 in terms of common, or number 2 in terms of threat level?
Commonality.
Okay.
Like, yeah, as you were saying earlier, like, what do I see the most?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the worst.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Pretty hard to deal with. It's probably number 2 or number 3 on my list of, like, especially recently, people who contact me and they're like, I need help with these bugs. Rice root aphids are pretty common.
So what would be some tips? Throwing the towel? No, there's we're gonna get there, because there are a few things where I think throwing in the towel, or at least a certain point throwing in the towel, is probably the best option, honestly. And just starting anew. I think I've done it more than once. I think there's probably plenty of people out there that have done it, listening now and listening down the road. Yeah, I don't want to get to the threat level. Like,
well, you'd have to respect that most people aren't in a professional setting contacting me to go to hear. You should just tear it down.
That's why they're gonna search this up, though, and they're gonna hear you on here, and then they're gonna hear only 15 minutes into the show rice root aphids, and if that's number 2 in commonality, and also really hard in threat level, or it's serious threat level, what are some tips for them? I mean, like, at least for home growers, maybe not. Let them hire you and bring you out, fly you out, all that fun stuff.
A lot of it's relevant. So if you're a commercial grower listening to this is relevant to you too. But a big part of it is still, it kind of depends on how you want to implement it and how bad it is. So like for a lot of people, the problem is that they don't crop scout in the first place, right? So kind of like what you were saying, like, don't get them, or in the first place, like, be preventative. And so if you do detect them, you want to rapidly respond to that.
Okay.
And hopefully, if all of your ducks are in a row and you have a vigilant procedure of detection in some way, then like you have incoming cuttings or something, or you have a dedicated person, maybe yourself, who is like looking at every plant or looking at the roots and making sure, and like not just glancing, but like actually taking a good look. And so that's number one. If you do encounter them, if you have a small amount of them, a lot of people will use some sort of botanical insecticide. That's super common. Depending on where you are, you may or may not have access to something like a pyrethrin or something like, and I didn't say permethrin or pyrethroid, which a lot of people get confused with. We can go over that too. But like azadirachtin or some sort of neem product is super common. Um, I'm a huge fan of entomopathogenic fungi like Beauveria bassiana. Beauveria is a huge one. People who follow me know that I'm a huge advocate for it. Works
So
against a lot of different insects.
I'm going to write that down because that's one that I've been holding on to almost to the point where this bag might expire because
Mm.
I'm just staring. I stared at these fungus gnats long enough where, and then even outdoors had the opportunity to use it outdoors where I'm just like I could just nuke all of this off by eating insects. But okay, keep going. We'll get to Bavaria bassiana later. That one I can pronounce, I think.
Yeah. No. So like for rice root aphids. So the other thing is that like again, and that's if you have a small population. If you have a bigger population, that's still true, but then the frequency of your applications is going to be different. If you're already using biocontrols for other things and you want to be targeted and coverage is going to be important and how you implement that, a lot of sort of discrete niche minutia, has to be considered too. And it also depends on the skill set of the person treating as well. Um, but like some people, for example, although they're called rice root aphids, sometimes I've encountered it where the rice root aphids, for whatever reason, they just don't disperse up into the foliage, or they just stay in the foliage as far as the person could tell, and they didn't actually enter the root system. So sometimes that can be a little bit wonky, and you might luck out because if you only have rice root aphids in the foliage, well, and you only have a small colony, then you can 86 that that population, and you will have a problem. Some people like to use lacewing larvae. That's very popular. It's a biocontrol that people like to use. Some people like to use aphidious wasps, so parasitic wasps,
Okay.
and that can be really useful in a very small grow. I don't think it's really worth it. It's probably too expensive. But if cost is not a problem, then you can leverage multiple of these at once in different populations.
And that rove beetle is one of them. This rove beetle is not one I buy every month. It's one I buy maybe a couple times a year, maybe only a few times total in the past, honestly. But they seem effective, and but they're on the more expensive side, especially when I'm buying 500 of them. It's probably like 10 cents a piece when it comes to the bug themselves. Now, when it comes to the predator mites, 25,000 of them probably cost me $25. It's probably 0.001 cents per piece or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, affordability and then also the effectiveness. In terms of those bugs or biocontrols, you mentioned lacewing larvae. Are there any other and the parasitic wasp? Are there any other kind of common accessible bugs that you might be able to use to fight them? And here's the thing, right? Is when it comes to a lot of these bugs and these infestations, there's several stages in which these bugs progress, right? They might go from the larva stage to the maybe just a crawling, or I'm sure you've got the proper terminology for this, but something that just maybe walks or moves or crawls or climbs, to something that might fly, to then the reproduction stage starts all over again. They might lay eggs, and this whole process might take anywhere from, I don't know, a couple days to several weeks. And in that process, you need to be targeting either the specific stage that pest is in or the whole process. And so that's why I like using a multitude of different bugs, because typically with the ones I'm using, they're targeting different stages of those that pest's life. Is there a cycle in which, or a point in the cycle in which you like to attack, not specifically for rice root aphids, or are you kind of coming at it like that full on approach of like, all right, we just kind of have to, part A, B, C, and maybe D as well, just to kind of get rid of this problem?
No, I am a huge advocate for a sort of multi-domain approach where you have, well, it's a system of systems approach, a holistic approach. You've got
Mhm.
a lot of times you have multiple pests. So in a realistic scenario, you're attacking multiple different reproductive cycles, like you're talking about, right? Maybe a larval stage, a pupa stage, and a adult stage, and then maybe an egg stage if you can affect that too, if it's an insect or something, or like a mite. Um, but you might have like powdery mildew at the same time. Or you might have something else as well. So there's all of these different chains that you should definitely be attacking, and as many as possible. As many as possible is the answer to that question.
Okay.
If you have some way that you can negatively impact the eggs, like an insect, an egg stage, an immature stage of some kind, and the adult stage as well. Well, that's really good. And if you can do it with different forms, right? So not just using a chemical agent that will do all of those things, because there are some, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, as long as you're being safe and not harming the environment and things like that. Huge advocate of that as well. The appropriate use of these sorts of things. I mean, heck, the Bouveria bassiana we were just talking about, that's a biocontrol. It's a fungus that kills rice root aphid, for example.
But it
So
also kills honeybees, right?
there's actually in Europe they use honeybees to spread the Bouveria. You can't do that here in North America though; it's not allowed.
So it doesn't
To
kill them?
answer your question though, yeah, weakened adults can be negatively affected.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly uh, the difference off the top of my head, but why that is. But that fact sprung out, and whenever I think of that exact thing, that's what comes to my mind. So I'm not actually sure why the difference. We can't actually import. There's some hoverflies that also go after aphids, and oftentimes people will encounter these outdoors. The larvae kind of look like caterpillars, so people will kill them, unfortunately, but they're actually really great against aphids. And there's a biocontrol in Europe that you can buy that's a hoverfly larva,
Hmm.
and you can't do that here because you can't import it because it might get out and it could be invasive and that kind of a thing.
Right,
So
right.
there's a lot of controls and restrictions on that, which I don't think are necessarily bad either, because for the obvious reason that you don't want to have a problematic ecological event. We've
Oh
had
my
so
gosh,
many
yeah.
already.
Oh yeah, yeah. It could get out of hand really quickly, and honestly, it can also take a really long time, which can be devastating in its own ways. That's so
Yeah.
let's talk about it. That's one of the reasons I was kind of was worried about Bavaria Bassiana. Mostly it's probably because I'm a little bit uneducated and unexperienced with it. So let's correct that. So one of my concerns with using it outdoors was harming all those good bugs. It's one of those things where if I were to use it outdoors, the infestation better be bad enough that it's like to me, it would be like a nuclear option. Um, to my understanding, it's not necessarily going to harm anything else around my soil, my garden, my plants, or anything like that. But in terms of any sort of soft bodied, type insects that might be in and around my soil, or maybe even the plants themselves, they would get infected with this Bavaria bassiana, which essentially in its own way destroys the bugs, and kind of clears them out. So my concern was just having that balance of not killing the good ones and killing the bad ones. Is that Are you kind of past that point of concern when it comes to Bavaria bassiana, at least outdoors?
How long have you followed me on social media?
A couple years. You were on the MBGS show probably 3 years ago, and I think that's the first time I heard of you.
That makes sense. The reason why I asked that question is because these are topics that I often talk about that I feel are underrepresented. So you've already hit two of those. So I was wondering if that might be correlated, and I
I
think it
hang out with
is.
this guy called Spartan Girl, and we do a lot of podcasts
Yeah.
together too. And so like I get the word every once in a while in my ear from him. Shout out.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. No, yeah. So it's that's an excellent point. I'm very happy that you brought that up because it's when I almost made that example myself just now because that's like as an example for something that you should be considerate about, like with the hoverflies and invasive species. Bouveria is found cosmopolitanly.
What does that
Found
mean?
in many places in the soil, various locations.
I would have thought you meant in the
So
cities.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Well,
Sorry,
they are related words for that reason. Lots of things.
okay.
But yeah, Cosmo, like the stars.
Got it.
Yeah, right. So yeah, no, it's not beyond thought to answer your question directly. No, this is something that I would want people to consider, and I think that like for people who like, I'm a huge advocate for like, for example, permacultural practices, or at the very least, any real sustainable practice, especially outdoors, but also indoors, as much as you can. Really,
Yeah.
is a good thing. And some things are actually surprisingly easy to do, while others are going to be more difficult. But I feel like sometimes people have a bias that if it's natural, it can't be a problem, right? I think we've all seen examples of this. Well, arsenic's natural, but it's poisonous to us, and or if you use too much of a substance, it can be problematic. And I think to answer your question, I think people should be aware that you shouldn't just apply anything wantonly, even if it seems like it's no big deal, because it can be. And with Bouveria, it's super broad spectrum. Hundreds of insects it can colonize. And also recognize that most people are going to be applying a product like GHA strain, Grasshopper Active, which is super common in like Botanigard and other products like that. And that was first, it was actually first sourced from a cucumber beetle larva, and it was created for grasshoppers originally, hence the name. And then they found that it worked on so many other things, just use it against those other things. And
Isn't that how most of this works out? Like we're just like, oh, trying to figure this thing out, and then
yeah,
look what else it works for.
oh yeah, and like in the last like 10 or 5 years, it's become a lot more possible for people to be more specific in their pursuits of like shaping like a specialization or something. And there's lots of Bouveria strains out there. But my point is that they're going to be. I mean, can they escape into the environment? That's a good question. Ostensibly, yes. So, think about that maybe. And maybe there's no grand problem that we see now, but like who's looking for it too? Who's looking for it? That's the question I ask. Yeah.
Exactly. And how long is it going to take for the DNR even to catch on, or the Bureau of Land Management or something?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem on my land, right? Outdoors, we're all permaculture. We've got our chickens, everything we grow outdoors, closed cycle. Everything's from the land. I threw some plants out a couple years ago just to see, and ran into leaf hoppers and everything. But I'm in the middle of a national forest, right on the lake. What I can do very limited. So that would be an interesting question on my standpoint is, what could I do that would be safe for outdoor?
You better go talk to that forest ranger, because they're going to tell you probably nothing.
Right. Yeah. That's an excellent question. It's a very unique situation. I was talking with somebody recently who has it's a similar situation, don't have a lot of things to use, but it's because they can't access it because it's very restrictive where they live, what they can use. Basically can't use any biocontrols. And so like you get these situations where for whatever reason, you can't just do the like maximally optimal thing that anyone else can do. And it's in those caveats and contexts that like, if you have to be strategic. Absolutely.
Up till
I'm
now,
glad
we've
that
been
you
doing
recognize that.
companion planting and trying to drive the bugs away using natural VOCs, right? But that's as far as we've gotten so far.
and that only gets you so far too, right?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
When you're in the middle of a forest, it's kind of a losing battle too.
I've got a
yeah, absolutely. It's a target-rich environment.
yeah, and I found bugs and stuff I never knew existed out there. So,
oh yeah.
So I've got a question that's been pressing me for honestly probably two years since I've learned about Bavaria bassiana, and I don't know that anyone's given me an answer that I trust, and I expect that you will be able to do this. how long, if I put it in my soil, and I want to know the answer to both, if I put it in the soil, Bavaria bassiana, in the soil of my pots indoors and also my garden outdoors, how long is that going to last in that soil?
It's hard to say. I know that it's common for the population to not necessarily persist for too long. There's actually examples where this isn't quite what you're asking, but as a soil fungus, it can also be an endophyte in a lot of plants. Can it be in cannabis? I'm not sure. I think that nominally that's probably plausible, but I don't actually know that.
You said an endophyte?
An endophyte, so a thing that lives inside a plant, the tissues.
Oh, okay. I thought you said endophyte, like it was like an
Endophyte.
I know, like and like I'm thinking like something.
Oh, endophyte.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Continue.
No. Yeah, and in this in these research reports where people are testing how long an endophyte like Bouveria can live, like in corn, for example, or tomato or something. They have they're usually they'll test like if the spores are just on the surface of the plant, how many of them like get into the plant that way, or they inject it with a syringe, or they do some other way to inoculate it that escapes my mind. And it turns out that injecting the spore load right into the plant is superior for colonization, and it tends to last longer. In some plants, they lasted like several months. In other cases, they would be significantly less. So, um, yeah, it seems like I feel like outside of the plant is going to be even more hostile for all these different reasons.
So in reality, probably not even the cycle of that plant in the 3 to 6 months it's going to live indoors. That Bavaria bassiana, if we inoculated maybe just the soil at home, by the time we harvest it, that Bavaria bassiana probably won't even exist in that soil. You're saying?
Well, that's a question. Well, that's a question that I often ask people, not only for Bavaria, but also like various mycorrhizal fungi and other things, bacteria and various other microbes. Because, like, just because you apply it doesn't mean that it's doing the things that you think it's supposed to. For some organisms, it's maybe more reliable because they do whatever they do really easily, and they don't need a whole lot of contacts or other microbes to really do what they're doing, like some sort of iron chelating organism or something. But or Bouveria, right, which basically is hunting bugs to kill. But if there's no bugs for it, and it has only a few other alternate ways to get food, and those aren't there, it might get boxed out by something that's more appropriate for that environment. And also, it can change. Like in the wet season, it's going to be maybe more feasible for it to exist longer. But if it's really really dry, like in Southern California, for example, that might be less likely. I knew I read a research report about Neozygotes, I think Zygotes. It was a fungus that goes after spider mites, and they tested it out. And I remember in the report they had mentioned that like they thought that the results would have been higher if it wasn't for the fact that they were applying it in like the dead of summer or something where it's like really dry, and they're like, well, we recognize that like this outdoor trial is going to be affected by that, and in other research where they don't do that, it's better. So yeah, obviously a very big point.
Yeah, just where the environment you're doing these tests in, matter for sure, especially when it comes to things like fungi, right? You just mentioned spider mites. Is that the number one threat level bug?
No, I don't think so. I think they're actually pretty. I think they're pretty common. So in that way, I would agree. Like rice root aphids, even more. They're on whole kinds of plants. So like in that way, they can be on on some weed somewhere, or some orchard nearby or something like that. So in that way, I would say they're probably one of the most easiest ones to encounter. But I actually don't think that they're that problematic. But that assumes that you're doing things like crop scouting and that sort of thing, which people don't always do.
It's not where you just walk in at day 35 and there's webs
Yeah.
from one end to the other.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Some of the pictures
I mean, I've
Grandmaster
had
level
it,
has shared.
people say it, right? People say it where like they're like, oh, you know, it just happened overnight. There's no way that happened overnight.
Someone came in with a box full of spider mites and dumped them on my plants.
I actually had some
I don't know.
spider
They
mite
just
issues.
couldn't have done it in a day. Like you could do. I believe I would defy somebody to
To
shape.
try it. Oh, don't do that.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Don't do that. Don't
Because
encourage this type of behavior.
yeah, no, it would be so difficult to do. I think that it's at least a week. At least a week.
You have to
So,
supercharge
yeah.
them somehow.
Yeah, maybe. Well, you know, they resist a lot of compounds and some insecticides and miticides, things that you shouldn't apply to cannabis even, and especially like neonicotinoids, actually make them more reproductive and has all these other wonderful benefits that stimulates their immune system. Yeah, I know, right? So that's another thing. Like people out there being like, oh, I got the, you know, I'll use something that's really nasty and I just won't tell anyone, but you can actually mess yourself up if you don't know. I mean, you shouldn't ever do this, but you know, it might be rewarded for the bad behavior.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's been a lot of that, and that's that's why we have a lot of regulations surrounding testing and things like that nowadays. And of course, we always encourage everybody to know and trust their grower because that's the best way to kind of do it.
I would agree with that.
So if so where are spider mites at on that threat level? Because for me personally, I've never dealt with them in any extreme way. I don't even know if I've seen like in a garden that was dealing with it to that level of like netting on top of the or webbing on top of the plants or anything like that. I've seen some terrifying photos and stuff, but I've seen some of those like little spot damage on lower leaves and stuff. Like, all right, that's going to be a problem. Let's take care of it. Never see anything past that, but it seems to me like in the last 10 years I've been doing this, it seems like it is a pretty common horrific problem up there with powdery mildew. So is it just one of those things where if it gets to that point you really just drop the ball on it, or because like you said, there's not really a way for them to just take over immediately, even if you've got some, would you call them nicotined up ones?
The neonicotinoids, yeah, the pesticides. Good old imidacloprid.
Oh yeah, that one. So is it just a matter of really dropping the ball? Because are they easily taken care of? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm saying that there's such a common pest in agriculture in general that there's a lot of options available for treatment. If you let it get super out of hand, though, but you could say that about anything. So
right.
I
That's
feel
fair.
like that's the intellectually honest answer. But so yeah, I would say that if you don't let them get out of hand, if you are able to catch them early, essentially, then I think that it should be fine. And I feel like if you do some basic crop scouting and you don't just trust but also verify the cut that you got from your friend who is totally sure that everything's fine. I think that's pretty important. But they'll just come in one day, the populations will swell like when it gets really hot usually, and there's a lot of weedy plants around on your property. You don't know this, but there's like 10 different plants that have like hundreds of these spider mites. So one day, they're just crawling around, or the plant that they were on maybe finally dies.
Smell those terps.
You thought you were all clean walking to your freaking greenhouse out there.
Yeah, exactly. Or they're touching the wall of your house and they get through the window or something. There's so many of them.
I controlled them in the greenhouse minimally this year by agitating them with fans and wind in the greenhouse, and actually just slowed them down because they were at a point in which I dropped the ball. I didn't catch them soon enough, and some of the at one of the plants was for sure seemed to be a sacrificial plant, and I kind of just let that one go, and the rest I kind of controlled, with a little bit of defoliation and some honestly air movement around the plant.
They don't like air movement, and they love heat. Those are the two things I've learned.
They do love heat. Yeah, because and this is sort of the same for thrips too.
Oh my god, that's
you'll
another
get
one.
you'll get here's the thing, spider mites don't they're not really they're not directly lethal to your plants. I think that's what I would consider a high threat pest, right? If
Makes sense.
if we rate it on a scale of lethality and how long you have until
I've got a number one, Matt. I know where you're going with this. I got it on camera. Number one threat: white-tailed deer.
Yeah, see that can
We'll
happen.
just munch a whole plant, man.
Or somebody who thinks they can maybe steal it and sell it for something. That's also a huge pest. I usually don't get contracted for those kinds of pests.
Yeah, it's probably a different type of contractor.
Yeah, that's a different kind of contractor.
Yeah.
What about those thrips? Going to those a little bit, because I very recently just lost control of the thrip population in my gardens, and we had talked about before the show, I generally fight bugs with bugs, but I do as minimally as possible. I like to try to just keep it truly as organic as possible, even though it's indoors.
So like I was saying, thrips are difficult for the same reason, that the population will get huge and abundant, and then all of their plants that they were feeding on, the annuals and things that might be around, grasses and stuff, those will die back, and then you have this huge population and nothing for it to feed on. So right by your house, for example, and so then they'll gravitate, they'll just spread around, and eventually they'll find your plants through various ways. So thrips are difficult because they're also very hard to see, and you can just get a couple of a few of those individuals in there, and when they lay their eggs, it's inside the tissue of the plant. So what also happens to people, so not all thrips do this, but Western flower thrips, for example, does this.
Is that what I'm seeing on the leaf? Is that what I'm seeing on the leaf? Is that their egg?
No, it's probably the damage.
Oh, okay.
The scarring is usually not visible. It's just so small. The incision is so tiny. But that's what they do. It's underneath the epidermis of the plant. And so what can happen is somebody can spray their plants or whatever, or however they're going to control it, maybe these predatory mites or something, which I like to use. And they're like, hey, man, here's your cut. But actually, there's eggs in that cut, and you don't know this, and they don't know this. And even if they sprayed something, right, the spray doesn't, because hopefully you're not applying a systemic compound, right? So the contact killer doesn't kill it, and then the thrips problem starts again. So it's why I'm often talking about really heady things and the deep arcana of physiology and things, because it's kind of like a cheat sheet. It can be a little bit complicated sometimes, but essentially if you know little things like that, then you know in what ways to be more vigilant, and maybe you don't have to do so much extra work that way if you kind of are aware that could be a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just still blown away that they're actually laying eggs in the tissues, and
that's wild.
And I'm processing how I got said clone and whatnot as you were saying the rest of that. But yeah, they've been a terror. Spider mites have been a terror. The root aphids I threw in the towel, I caught it way late. It was early in my career of growing, and just an absolute decimation. Fungus gnats, some annoying SOBs.
Why are fungus gnats only ever there when you're growing in soil? Because I've been growing for over 10 years now, and
in soil? Only in soil, or do you mean only in indoor?
Okay, I've been growing for 10 years, and I've grown in soil and cocoa and rock wool and steel wool, and I've never seen fungus gnats in my indoor gardens except when I'm growing in soil. What is it? Why?
I mean, I often see them in rock wool and other substrates. So it could just be experiential. I don't know. Could just see that kind of stuff happens to people a lot, where it's just coincidental. And I'm always trying to seek information that might be outside of my own experience too. I think that you made me remind myself that, like, that's another topic that people should know, is that
substrates
not
or media.
everything. There are things outside of your own experience sometimes. And that's why research is so important too, because there's things that might intuitively make sense to me based on my experience and research, but then something else comes up. And
and I'm sorry we didn't do this right off the bat. Talking about research and experience, how the heck did you get into this, Matthew Gates? Like, what drove you to have an interest in this? What is your experience and your education, your research? Like, tell us a little bit about that, your qualifications.
Yeah, sure. So I went to San Diego State University, and I got a bachelor's in horticultural science. But originally I wanted to join the military. I come from a military family, and where everyone's all like, "Oh, he says you could have done it." Da, 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 da. But I had a lot of experience around people who were in the Navy and also in the U.S. Army, and I joined the ROTC and STSU and that sort of thing. And I had a lot of great experiences, but ultimately, for various reasons, some of which are sort of personal, and other ones you can find on some news source, I'm sure, about San Diego. I decided that was a bad idea. And for me personally, greatly respect people who did join, though. And I have many friends who actually did. I have one friend of mine who was actually in the infantry as enlisted and commissioned to the U.S. Army. That was very cool. I was very glad to see his success. But for me personally, I decided to take a lot of that camaraderie and also, I guess, strategic perspective and analytical thought and apply it to my first love, which was agriculture and horticulture. So that's also why I make use of a lot of the I think the terminology and also the sort of logical reasoning about how to go about things. Not because like the military is like the best thing in the world or anything like that, but it's because those sorts of institutions often, especially recently, they make use of like game theory and other sorts of like kind of, I don't know how to say this. I was actually thinking about this recently, how to word this very thought, but I guess it's that it's tactics and strategy essentially, and it can be done in a way that does do with like bombs and missiles and things, but how you deploy the biocontrols, for example.
Right.
How do you threat model something? How do with that kind of information? You can do that about anything, really. But I think integrated pest management works really well because you're often considering a lot of different systems in the same way that a lot of military doctrinal thought. And for those who are in the military, who might be watching this or something like that, this probably sounds a lot like TRADOC kind of nerdy stuff. And it is. It is. It's the weird logistical stuff that's not the super sexy stuff that people are always seeing in movies and things like that. If that makes sense.
Oh, 100%, man. It's like you're fighting those little battles, ground zero, which is like in the roots and stuff, and sometimes on the surface of the soil and sometimes in the air and whatnot. But the big movie explosions, that's Pedro holding up his big ass jar of hash down there and making us all very jealous. You know what I mean? Like that's the movie explosion. So but every single one of us that's ever grown a plant, and especially that has dealt with some sort of pest issue, certainly respects the crap out of what you bring to the table, man. And we appreciate you coming on the show, because it's not often that we get to talk about this kind of stuff, because there's not a whole lot of experts out there, it seems. I mean, you're one of the few in the space that I see posting regularly about this kind of stuff. And I've even sent you questions over the summer about, eggs I've found in my garden. What the heck's going on? What the heck is this thing? Like, what's this bug? You're my what's this bug guy.
Yeah, I'm a lot of people's what's this bug guy. That's right. I appreciate that. I I think that it's a well, here's one thing. So like in your advertisement for this very stream, you referred to me as an entomologist, mycologist, botanist. I don't have degrees in this. The reason why it's on my bio on Instagram is because it's a cheeky joke, and this has happened enough times that maybe I should really consider like just getting rid of it, because people have misinterpreted or thought that I was describing myself as something that I'm not, like duplicitously, which is definitely not what I want people to take away from it. But I say that because integrated pest management is like being those things all, like those are the considerations you have to like do all at once, right? So it's not just insects, it's not just fungi, it's not just microbes or things like this. It's all those things combined. You have to draw from so many things. There's a famous entomologist a long time ago who made basically said the same thing. I think he used to be like a Supreme Court justice. It was like a long time ago in the U.S. History, but basically when asked what it is to be an entomologist, they said, oh, it's basically like being all these other things because insects are pretty much everywhere. So I that's where that logic comes from. That whole, it's a holistic perspective.
I like it, man. I like it a lot. And you know, the way you describe yourself is, I think, the way a lot of growers often describe themselves, but from a different perspective, because especially home growers that have built their own grow rooms, you know, and maybe you didn't do all this yourself, but carpentry, HVAC, plumbing, you know, like it's all of these things wrapped into one. And you might not, you know, end up being an expert in them, but you certainly have to know quite a bit about it to be able to do it, or understand it, and be able to actually put it together, you know, put it to use in a practicality, and then, you know, be successful with what you've built. Yeah, it's really great to be an expert in one thing, but it's really hard not to be experienced in a lot of different things. At least
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Right.
Is superior than a master of one, right? I think is how it finishes.
In my experience, you know,
or is not.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the Jack of all trades, master of none is actually, I think the whole quote, now that I think about it, is actually against being the Jack of all trades, not being for it, believe it or not.
Everyone takes that one little chunk, though.
Right.
Yes, exactly. I'm now forgetting how it goes, but yeah, no. But I think it's super, I mean, you can't help but be, if you're a consummate professional, and even if you're not doing things for money, but having that experience, absolutely, you can't help but have all this various exposure. And I think to a broader degree, some people might say just, you know, living life eventually is the case too for a lot of people, and that might just be distilled in what we call common sense. You know, the expectation that people have enough exposure to something that they will be able to do something with that information. But yeah, absolutely, HVAC, you know, cultivating plants, basically growing life, you have to emulate all of these things, right? You have to understand them, and the better you understand them, the better you can achieve that goal, I think.
That's I have a certain special respect for breeders too, because once I started understanding genetics, and then obviously having kids of my own, and you see it not just in plants, but in people, you know, and it's like it's quite amazing the variety you can get, especially when you go with intention, you know, or even when you go with an intention.
I would agree with that.
All right, so I have another burning question.
Okay.
My one about Bavaria Bassiana lasting for however long. This one has probably been in the back of my mind even longer. More pertains to the bugs themselves. One of the most common things I see pushed, at least on these sites that, you know, sell these bugs, or at least one of the most commonly available or promoted or marketed thing, I don't know what it is. Matthew, are ladybugs worth it? I've heard so many things about ladybugs. Should we throw them in our indoor garden, or are we just like throwing them into the lights and letting them die into the fans? And, you know.
And what about the difference between Asian lady beetles and ladybugs?
And what about the difference between indoor and outdoor?
Yeah.
Very variables.
So I think that a lot of times they're not worth it for a lot of people. I think that it depends a lot on. Well, there's a lot of things that preclude me from recommending them, and people who know that a lot of lady beetles are destructively harvested from places where you don't want that to happen. That's also one of the reasons why they might not be effective in the first place if they're collected when they are overwintering and they're in this torpor. Then when you release them, it's essentially going to be in an environment that might resemble spring or summer. So their first reaction to getting out of this sort of hibernation period is that they want to disperse, right? To go somewhere where there might be food. So that's kind of not what you want, really, especially outdoors, right? So that's going to be a problem. Um, there's also the fact that, like, yeah, Harmonia axyretus, or the harlequin lady beetle, is invasive in North America, for example. It's from Asia, and it is highly competitive. It will even eat other lady beetles. A lot of people might know that. It can transmit, although rarely, some pathogens to other lady beetles as well. And it gets this name Harlequin because it has many different phenotypes that look amazingly different. Jet black body with 2 red spots or orange spots, or it might look more traditional with like the red elytra, or the wing coverings with the black polka dotting that a lot of people think of when they think of lady beetles, or it might look very different. There's like 30 plus phenotypes. So, and then also a small pet peeve of mine is that some people refer to the harlequin lady beetles as not actually lady beetles. They're definitely lady beetles. They're just not the ones that you want. I think that's a weird thing that I've heard people say that online.
That's kind of specious, or something. Wait, what's the word that you get? It's what's the family level?
Bigotry? Is it bigoted? It's bigoted.
The bigoted? Yeah. Okay, we'll go with that.
It's bigoted against lady beetles.
Yeah, man.
They're in the coccinellidae, just like the other ones. There's even some lady beetles that go after spider mites, Cethoris punctillum, or there's some that go after powdery mildew, believe it or not, like Silobora. So there's all kinds of lady beetles out there. Not all of them just go after aphids.
Another question about them: do they, in fact, collect their pests and run around with them, or like the pet? Like, no. So, no.
Ants will do that to some ants. That's another thing. People think that all ants will do this, but only a select amount will do the aphid moving thing. Some of them will just feed and protect, feed on the honeydew and protect the colony they come across.
Okay, but ladybugs don't do this?
No, not like intentionally or anything.
Okay.
Like, I could envision like a lady. Somebody's gonna like send me a video of like a aphid on the back of a lady beetle and be like, "I proved you wrong." So like that's not quite. I don't think that behavior is super common.
Okay, yeah, not like researched enough or recorded enough.
Wonder who's bugged out more, the people that are hearing lady beetle or the people that are hearing ladybug.
I'm gonna keep saying ladybugs because that's all I was raised in.
I think ladybug is more common, to be honest. Yeah.
Is there an actual difference? I totally was joking. Is there an actual difference?
So this will only work. This only work for this phenotype, right? So,
and that's what I was. That's something I learned. I did not realize that.
A lot of times they have this M-shaped mark in this like shoulder region, right below the head and above the elytra.
What I see a lot of with people online is they're buying ladybugs from Amazon. Then what they're receiving is Asian lady beetles. They show close-ups and they're not correct. And that's
right.
So these are the harlequin. It's just a phenotype of the harlequin. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and a lot of them do have this M shape. So it's not wrong. It's not wrong for sure.
Interesting. I didn't realize there was more of them. That's crazy.
Yeah, there are definitely there are tons. There are tons.
So are they a net positive when it comes to pest management or not?
What's your heuristic for good? Because I think that Superior over here with the permaculture might not like all of those things that I just mentioned about being invasive. But even if you got them, I think in like a good context or something, and you could like hypothetically guarantee that they're not going to get out or something, and also you could guarantee that you got them and they're not like right past hibernation or something. Even so, I think that they're not lady beetles are not um, they're not my first choice, but they could have a net positive. Sure, I mean hypothetically yes, provisionally yes. You know what I mean?
Not a very strong proponent of them, though. I see.
No. Lacewing larvae, for example, are super voracious, and they're more expensive though usually.
Well,
But I would
that brings
definitely.
us to the question from Chasmanian Devil in chat. He wants to know what is the most beneficial bug to use?
Yeah, I mean that is like a big question I'm often asked,
For
and
sure.
I mean it's not really it's not it's a I think as the Buddhist would say it's a question wrongly asked because it doesn't really mean anything in the sense that there is no such thing as a most beneficial bug I think to use
I
because
mean,
they're all
unless they're
very variable.
increasing my terpenes, it's not, it's not really
Yeah,
beneficial,
yeah. Um, but I would say that my favorite, most generalist predator that you can get commercially, let's say, I like the predatory mice. I think that's the best way to answer that question. Is what's the best bang for your buck potentially,
Okay.
most generally, and I think that that would be like the Swirsky mites or the cucumerus mites. They go after russet mites. They go after broad mites. They go after um, whitefly, for example, the nymphs and the eggs primarily, and they go after other thrips. How could I forget? So they go after a bunch of different things, and that makes them very attractive, I think, as a preventative. And when I'm working with clients who are like, these biocontrols are really expensive, year to year. How can I justify them? It's like, it sometimes it's not practicable. It really depends on your resources, but I think generally they pay for themselves just by neutralizing something. Especially like I think that you could make the case potentially if you had like really good biosecurity and you're like indoor and like you've got all the fixings that will prevent things. You've got a very competent crew. You have a quarantine area when you have cuttings that come in, all this stuff. Maybe you could get away with it. But if you don't have all that, this passive defense, I think, is really superior.
Now, there's a lot of bugs we can use, like lady beetles that will, you can see with the naked eye. Even these rove beetles, I can see with the naked eye crawling around. And, some would, some of us have good enough vision to even see predator mites with the naked eye. You can just, when you get the car, you just kind of stare at it for a second, wait for something to move, and you're like, okay, yep, they're alive. Nematodes, on the other hand, you can't see them. It comes in this like powder form and mix it up with water, spray it, pour it. It would, can you tell us about nematodes and how they kind of work versus how a predator might work? So maybe you start there because you were just talking about them. Like, how do predator mites attack the pests? And you talked about larvae and adults or pupae, right? Predator mites versus nematodes. How are they attacking the pests and where?
Well, they do very different things. So the hypoaspis mites, for example, they're mostly in the substrate. The cucumerus and Swirsky I mentioned are mostly in the foliage and somewhat, they sometimes go down into the substrate too. Most of the pests you're going to be trying to deal with them are going to be in the foliage, I guess I should say. Nematodes are basically always going to be in the substrate or soil. The way that the nematodes work is that they are predatory. They usually go after things like fly larvae is the main thing that I would see them being used for, like in a cannabis context. Sometimes people will apply them in foliage for like caterpillars and things, but that's under very unique circumstances because the sun is especially outdoor, and lights in general are going to cook them. So that's usually not super effective. They'll also go after thrips in their so-called quiescent form. So thrips don't pupate. They're not part of the group of insects that do that. But what they do happen to have is this little this like nap time that they take, where right before they become adults, they kind of pseudo pupate, and then they fall into the substrate because they're not moving, and then a predatory mite like Hypoaspis or Delosia, like you were talking about, the rove beetles, or the nematodes could come in there, and in the case of nematodes, they find an orifice, go through that orifice, release a bacteria that actually does the killing, then they reproduce in there. They eat the decaying insect body, and then they reproduce, and then there's more of them than what started, and then those go out to search for more. So pretty soon, these many millions of nematodes are going to be going after things like fungus gnat larvae and that sort of a thing, and you can pretty quickly get rid of them. In fact, nematodes are my favorite way to manage fungus gnats. If you have a good source and you can apply them reliably and well, then I really like to use them personally.
All
I
right,
think they
best
do
way to
pretty
apply
well.
them, because I just do a soil drench, and I do it with an extremely high amount, like again 50 million
Yeah,
over like 10, 12
yeah,
lights, you know.
yeah. And for those who aren't familiar, like they might think, "Oh, well, that's a lot." Well, it is a lot, but it's a pretty standard amount. You get a whole ton of them for the amount that you normally get for a
Oh,
batch or
oh
whatever,
yeah, I mean
depending on the amount.
it would fit in this jar, you know. It's not a crazy like
Exactly. Yeah, so it's not like it's not like people are buying like 10,000 bottles and applying them all at once. You for them to be effective, the biocontrol company has to give you quite a bit, but it's fine. And there's various ways you can use them, but as long as you're agitating the water, I think it's most important to make sure that the nematodes. Otherwise, you have a situation where you have no nematode, no nematode, no nematode until the very end, and it's all nematodes in the last row. If you're like hand
nice.
watering or something like that, so make sure
Nice.
to agitate your water source
But
when
but
you're.
you should be like stirring, right? We don't want to use like a high
That's what I
power
mean.
like sub pump or something, because can't you like won't too much pressure essentially kill the new? I'm gonna start
Yeah, you
saying it
can't put
correctly.
too much
Nematodes.
pressure either. And also, anecdote that I've heard more than once actually is don't, if you're going to use like a spray gun or pistol or something, take out the screen
Mm-hmm.
or they're gonna die.
Yeah,
They're
read
gonna
the
be
directions,
squished to
guys. It says it on the
smithereens.
directions.
Yeah, please follow the directions. Because people ask me, they'll be like, "Oh, they didn't work this time," and for a long time that was an example I only had one example of, and then like over time that became more than once. So
Yeah,
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 just be sure to like look for that kind of stuff. That due diligence is super critical.
yeah. Application matters. Application rates probably matter. I just go overboard, and typically
Big
it
with
seems to be okay.
biocontrols. Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah. By the way, I think that my hard limit will be for me 9:30.
Okay,
So in about 20 minutes. So if you
not a
have something
problem.
special planned or a chat questions or things like that, I want to do those or whatever you want. I'm game.
Definitely, chat. You heard them. Get those questions in. Doesn't matter if you're on Twitch or YouTube or what channel you're watching this from. We get all those questions back here on the back end, so we'll be able to share them. Can you really quickly tell us about Pestapalooza and what that is?
Yeah, sure. Sure can. So with Jordan River of Growcast, we had Pestapalooza recently, and we're probably going to have another one, although we recently had to push back for logistical reasons some of the plans that we had. But I think we might hit up Virginia, I believe, was the one that we had planned. Probably the biggest one, most likely. So keep a lookout for that. But yeah, we go over various pests. We go over their threat levels, for example, and you get a bunch of cool freebies. This was one of them. I was pretty happy with how this laminate came out. Obviously, somebody who's going to advocate for their own stuff is going to say, "Oh, it's so good," but it was really good. This is something that will like last in your greenhouse or your indoor grow or something like that, where it can get wet and that kind of a thing. And most of the pictures are from me. And also the descriptions and the life and the life cycle and the treatment, just basically a cheat sheet. And we also answer the biggest, most important thing that I do is I like to answer the questions that people have, because that's like the most important thing. A lot of people are coming to see the event and also collaborate with other people. It was very endearing to see so many people. One person actually, when I went to New York, it was a great event, and we had somebody who came from Wisconsin, I believe, all the way from Wisconsin. They flew in just for the event, which was very humbling, and I made sure that we got some good freebies for them. But Jordan River is also the other half of the Pestapalooza. It did a lot of organizing. Definitely deserves the credit for getting that information out to people, and also providing a lot of the we have kind of like an IPM like first aid for people. So like some products that people could use that are easy to apply, some seeds, for example, and some
A
other
little
cool things.
IFAC. I like
Yeah,
it.
basically, yeah, an IPM IFAC. Yeah, exactly. Now you're figuring it out. You
Yeah, dude.
understand.
I like marketing. Let's do it. Let's put together a little. You could brand that up. You get it.
Yeah, yeah. Like if it wasn't obvious, like I got the Zentanol tab, right?
Oh, don't forget your
Maybe I'll
hat.
make more of these. You guys can let me know. Yeah, yeah. So this is not Zentanol though. This is something different.
It just feels military-esque, that hat.
Yeah, right. It's like a tricolor flag. This is actually the Cascadia Doug. Do you know that flag?
I
You're
do
familiar
not.
with that?
I like
Yeah.
the
So
tree.
the Cascadian region. Yeah. So I believe that's a Douglas fir. And the Cascadia bioregion is super diverse, and it's like Northwest North America. And somebody made a flag that represents that area a while ago. An organization that was trying to protect the environment up there thought that was great. And this is a very abbreviated version of the story. They essentially adopted it, and it became kind of a thing. So I thought it looked cool too, and also I wanted to support the organization, so I bought one patch. And they had trouble getting it to me, so they gave me an extra free one, and then the other one came in, so it worked out. So yeah, but I think that it's important to kind of look at things, like I said earlier, in a system of systems approach. I just think that's smart, and it's not necessarily like anti-organic or anti-natural or anything like that. I think the logic is still the same regardless of how you're growing, if that makes sense. So it's truly neutral
Definitely.
in that way. It's just logic or
It's pragmatism, right?
reasoning.
To an
Yeah,
extent,
yeah,
critical thinking,
yeah.
all of those important things. Okay, so I got a question for you regarding HLV. Let's see. Spartan Grown is requesting Synchangel to inform the panel on how fungus gnats can carry mites onto your plants, and or how popping seeds does not guarantee the plants are free of HLV. I'll try to put that on here so you can see it. Yeah, 2 questions there, I think.
Yeah, so I don't remember the fungus gnat mite thing actually, so that doesn't look very good. Unless they meant whitefly. Unless they meant whitefly, because whiteflies can vector broad mite. It's true. It's true. So for those who have not had broad mite before, they will literally seek out the waxes of the silverleaf whitefly, and they will like attach themselves to the legs. And if too many of them do, it actually kills the whitefly. It can't move. It can't operate appropriately, and it starves and dies. And that's happened before. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel, Zentanol, that goes over that. And there's a really good video of it that I was able to find. So I'm not sure about that. If you have more information to remind me. And then for HLV, hop latent viroid, here's the quick and skinny. I also have a video about how it works and how it transmits and how viroids work in general. But basically, it's like a segment of what's called RNA. RNA is used to make DNA, and then DNA is used to make, in almost all cases, proteins, and then those are then used to do all kinds of things in the plant or in our bodies. So hop latent viroid is basically a nice, interesting strand of RNA. So the plant cell recognizes it as RNA and goes, I'm going to code this. But instead of coding, DNA, it codes more hoplite viroid. And it basically bogarts the cell machinery that is supposed to be replicating all kinds of other things. That's why the symptoms for hoplite viroid is so weird, like chlorosis and things. So the answer to the question is that basically once it gets in the plant, it essentially becomes really very, very high level eventually in various parts of the plant. And the roots are actually a very common sink where a lot of hoplite viroid strands essentially will go down and stay. So it gets into the germplasm, and it can be passed from parent to offspring through the seed germplasm. As the seeds are developing, that becomes a sink as well.
So seeds. What about pollen?
Oh yeah, I forget off the top of my head, but I think pollen might actually be correct. It actually might be the case, but I forget right in this
it would
moment.
make sense to me.
Well, it's very uncommon. Very uncommon. A lot of viruses and other pathogens, because pollen grains are exceptionally small.
Okay, that brings me to another question. I
think you might be right. Yeah. If anyone in the chat knows and can remind me,
that was another kind of a two-parter. Is also how you can get HLVD from pollen in the wind. Also, Spartan was tagged in that. He must be busy working or something, but maybe he'll hop on and kind of follow up on that before you go. Okay, the small size of pollen. I want to talk about that. But before we get there, the roots, you said that the roots could be very high in this virus. So does that mean replanting into the same pot as that? It would give you a high likelihood of maybe, for those people that are using living soil or something, would there be a chance of contaminating plant after plant after plant then?
Well, even the water, maybe. There's some circumstantial evidence. Well, there's some circumstantial evidence that in other viroids have been found to even absorb, or I'm sorry, some fungi in the soil have been shown to absorb viroids and might even transmit them across plants. Viroids are mostly found in plants for the most part. So it was a really shocking thing to read about. And so to answer your question, that's certainly possible, but there might be other vectors too that are even more prolific.
Okay, fair enough. That was definitely a concern after just
like what happens,
not that I have it, but
what happens when you leave roots behind in your soil, from the previous plant? The little
some people are asking about dry buds even. Like, can dry flower be a vector? And I think I saw something recently that was like, more on the plausible side than the not plausible side. Just because it happens in a laboratory setting, though, also is like not necessarily going to mean it's going to happen in the real world. But I think that for viroids, it's they tend to get into places more often than not. So I would be more cautious than not.
Okay, so micron size. Do we know the micron size of this viroid? I mean, does that exist? Is it like even?
Oh, I mean,
detectable? Is it
like what do you mean? Like, yeah, you could take a picture of. There are pictures of.
Is there any way to like screen it out physically? Is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Oh, not really.
Because it's like in the plant. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking. Yeah. I guess I'm thinking after the fact. Like I'm just thinking the roots still of just like, oh man, like this is kind of terrifying stuff. It's reminding me of some other like.
I think like there's like the phloem, right? So like the plant makes it photosynthesis happens. You get sugars. The sugars assimilate into the phloem, and the phloem goes from the source to the sink. So various sinks. In a lot of plants, that's going to be your roots. And some plants it'll be the corm or whatever. Like with plants that have like big starchy storage units, basically, of energy. And then also they'll go into like fruits and seeds and flower tissue and that kind of stuff. that's the other big sink for nutrients and resources. So that's kind of going to drive where latent viroid and other viruses would move. Now, it's very hard to talk about plant viruses. I'm not a virologist, but I do know that they're highly variable, and it's very hard to talk about them broadly. But a lot of viruses are vectored by insects, for example. A lot of plant viruses, a lot of animal viruses too, but plant viruses most prominently. And so some people also ask, well, can that be the case for hop latent viroid? And the intellectually honest answer is, I don't really know, but nominally, provisionally, plausibly, I think, because if you're sucking up the phloem, for example, if you're an aphid, there's probably going to be viroid in it if it has viroid, and and aphids will regurgitate that somewhere else. Now, in viruses, though, I will say this: the only reason why it gives me pause, because for some people it might be like, well, obviously that must be the case. But would you believe that there are viruses out there of plants where aphids will take them up and they don't actually vector them for whatever reason? Ostensibly, the particles are there, they're being regurgitated, or they would be, but not all viruses are going to act the same for whatever reason. So I'm always like, wait for the research to come out. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you get weird nuance.
Then that's the thing. Until you, oh man, Superior, I think you said this, like something about repeatability. Can you, in science, do you remember that, what you said?
Reproducibility, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure one of you guys will.
Yeah, until someone can reproduce it and consistently, then it can't be proven. So
yeah, it's one of those things where you just gotta you gotta keep trying it. You gotta do the whole scientific method and create some hypotheses and test it, test it and research it and test it again and try to prove yourself wrong before you just try to prove yourself right.
Iterate and test.
Yeah, absolutely. And ideally have different people, right, from different places in different places doing that replication.
Repeatability and
but absolutely. Yeah.
Limit the variables and control what you can.
There's so many. Okay, so we only have you for another 6 minutes. I want to ask, okay, all of us are very much hash focused when it comes to our gardening, I think.
Okay.
And they are the two solventless guys, so like bubble hash production, rosin, all that kind of delicious, tasty stuff like this. Now battered up Critical Kush. Oh, what's up? That's gonna be gone by tomorrow, I promise you, Pedro. Actually, no, I'm gonna have to save some of that, but and I stick on the hydrocarbon side of things. With hydrocarbons, we can kind of, it's essentially a liquid, so we can pretty much get it down to and this is why I bring up the micron thing you talked about with pollen, but I want to bring it up with hash, because with hydrocarbons you can really break it down. It's broken down into a liquid, so you can use a very, very small size mesh screen and still get that hash through, right? Whereas I don't know what kind of your what you guys would say, Superior and Pedro, your kind of minimum micron effective size is. What I'm curious to know, Matt, is if we were using screens to clean our material of bugs in it, but we're making hash, and we wanted to get clean hash at the end of it, but somehow screen out these bugs, what size micron would actually make that work?
Well, but wouldn't the maceration or pulverizing process, wouldn't that kind of
break legs and antennae?
I
don't know. You tell me. What if we were doing it at 29-degree water? I don't know.
I think so. Well, with the stirring and however you do it, right?
So maybe we atomize them enough that we get them past some of the bigger screens where the actual heads of the cannabis is still there. And
well, some parts. This is I like to tell people that I've read, and I don't know how true it is now that I think about it, and I can't cite the literature off the top of my head, but I believe I've read from a reputable source that there's an overlap between people who drink instant coffee and people who have or develop allergies to cockroaches.
Oh
Do you know
no, I
why?
don't. I don't like where this is going. I don't
No,
drink
yeah,
instant
'cause you
coffee,
already
but
know.
yeah, tell me where this is. You can feel.
Yeah. It's acceptable. Insect parts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depends on where you get it. Of course, it's not all instant coffee is made the same, but I think it's like a similar kind of thing.
Wow,
Now, I
just
will say
enough of it to
this,
give you an allergy.
fortunately, for whatever it's worth, these insects don't have like they're not gonna like transmit pathogens to us or anything like that through this, for whatever that's worth. Obviously you don't want like bug bite OG, but at the same time, just since you brought up the hypothetical, I don't think you would screen them out. I think that unfortunately, I think that you might have some insect bits.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Right.
we used to talk about getting
Shucks.
spider dicks, right?
Oh,
A Dagus.
Spider dicks. It's been a while. It's been a couple of years. It's just an outdoor
Well, it's okay.
something you deal with.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
then of course you see people, washing it and like washing their colas and stuff before they even trim it. Like after they harvest it, it's a thing to get some of that stuff off. And yeah,
Sure.
I guess there's some ways to do that, But yeah, man, bugs are gonna bug.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's one of those things where, like, I think some people will say, for maybe understandable reasons, it's just unacceptable to them. But for other people, like, some people don't mind it too much. Or in a lot of cases, I think people just don't think about it. Right, so it's just doesn't occur to them. This is true for a lot of things in cannabis and also other food products and other sorts of things. Like, you don't like people don't even realize how much like foreign DNA and stuff that they're just getting exposed to. All the endophytes in that tomato that they ate, or that apple that they ate, bacteria, fungi on the
Hey,
surface.
quit scaring the guests. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, so well, actually, I'm just saying that you're more impressive. Your body is more impressive than you give it credit for. That's my
Fair enough.
point.
Two more real quick, I guess, yes or no questions before you throw some plugs at us. Do you grow and do you smoke?
I do, but I feel guilty for saying that because I haven't grown cannabis in a while. And do I smoke? Absolutely, yeah.
All right, man.
Not a
Well,
lot of IPM specialists do, and I will say that when I started now 13 years ago,
nice.
I feel like a lot of people don't, or didn't have that desire, or they did have the desire, but their infrastructure, their organizations, were not really a fan of that. So sometimes you can't really blame the person, unfortunately. But
For
hopefully,
sure.
more and more acceptability will be coming, and has been coming in science and literature, and also just in other professional organizations. So I'm happy to see that change.
Oh yeah, man. Well, Matthew, I appreciate your time here tonight. It's been amazing learning about all of this kind of craziness, and I feel like this podcast could go on for another hour and a half or maybe another 3 hours longer, because there's just like
Absolutely.
so many infinite variables when it comes to this microscopic level of war that we battle sometimes in our gardens on, and such in levels and areas that we can't even see or access sometimes. So we got to just throw the troops down and hope they get it done, and
Way more things we think about than I thought.
yeah, man. Yeah, for real. Well, Matt, any Zenthal, Synchangel, all those different names. Could you just throw out all your plugs real quick before you go?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have professional inquiries, please check me out at zenthal.com. You can also contact me on social media. A lot more people are doing that, even for the professional inquiries. So Instagram, my private Instagram is at Synchangel, Synchangel. And you can also check out the bulk of my like pest and plant health information is on Zenthanol, the YouTube channel. I have a big aphid video that I've been talking about for practically the whole year because I've been so busy this year, and I've been trying to like up my graphics game a little bit and a little more attention to detail. So that'll be coming out soon. It'll be the ultimate aphid analysis, everything you wanted to know about aphids, and maybe a lot of stuff you didn't know. So I feel like knowing that information is very important. And also, is there anywhere else you can check me out? Twitter at Synchangel as well, and those are mostly the places. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Did we ask you what was the number one threat level bug?
I think that for a lot of people, it's for outdoor. I think one of the biggest ones is budworm, mostly because it's a dilemma. If you get it, even if you treat, you might still have tunneling and bud rot and other stuff that is a problem. And so even if you kill the caterpillar, you have a cadaver in your flower. So that's not great. So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Yeah. And then I think for russet mites might also be a pretty big contender for a lot of people, if only because the damage is so severe and it's very easy to get it, not notice that you have it, and then spread it around, and then the population blooms all around at the same time. That can be very devastating. And then I think the biggest one, though, for indoor might be a microbial pathogen like Pythium or Fusarium, where in 24 to 48 hours, if your like temperature in your water is too much, or you have a hydroponic system or something, it can girdle your plants very quickly. And I've seen that happen too. It's not always what people get, but as far as like severity, I think it's pretty high.
That was the hardest.
Hop-laden viroids, of course, is a huge problem. Yeah.
All right, cheers, man. We'll let you go. Pedro Superior, you guys want to do some devs and talk about what the heck just happened here?
Yeah.
Cheers, man.
Thanks again for joining us, man. Take care, dude.
Matthew. You're very welcome. Next time, I look forward to it.
Wow.
That was way more to think about than I thought. And I feel so scatterbrained trying to like talk about it with him, honestly, like because I don't even know where to start with this kind of stuff. But it just did a hell of a lot better than me. I just sat back here staring at the camera.
Yeah, no, it was deep. That was awesome. He knows his shit.
Well, if all you guys in chat, I mean, throw out some questions if you still got them. I think we can. If you guys want to hang out, we got 27 minutes. I'm just do some
dabs. I am beyond medicated, but let's do it. I would never tap. Well, maybe sometimes, but
so I crushed the Taliman first. I
actually just smoked mine over here,
and still smelling the terps on it. That's a funky, stinky one. I like it a lot. The where is it? Trap cherry. I'm trying to hide from myself because I've got like 1 dab of it, 2 dabs of it left in there.
Trap
cookies. Sorry, I keep saying trap cherry because someone else gave me a trap cherry, different brand, and I was like, oh, I could compare them, and then I was like, oh no, it's cookies. It's cookies.
Trap C just gives me the shivers, man. I'm just thinking about it. Wow,
it's such a good flavor, bro.
I was just gonna smell. I was just gonna hit the clementine here, and it's just. I'm like, I'm not prepared for that amount of taste right now.
Yeah,
I actually backed off.
So I gotta wait.
I showed it. I was like, I'm gonna smoke this clementine. I'm like, no, I'm gonna switch. I'm not prepared for that. If you guys remember hearing me on the show last week, I was virgin on sick. My voice was all crappy last week, and I'm still not completely over it, honestly.
Yeah, you can hear it in your voice there.
Yeah,
a little throaty.
So I didn't think that.
It's got the bass on this week.
I didn't. Yeah. I didn't think the extra. Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, I didn't think the extra terps would be the good idea. We were actually talking about that. We were actually talking about that with a deep voice. Sometimes you get sick and you get that deep voice real quick.
So I just filled up these terp cards. I got the clementine. So this is just the high terpene portion of the clementine. So crashed out the THCA.
I saw your photo of all the carts there stacked up. That's pretty awesome.
Right, Army.
So there's even more terps in there.
No, it's a higher ratio, but not more.
Well, yeah.
So more.
More
Yeah.
profound.
No, I'm like, wait. So, yeah, more.
Dang it, you're right. Yeah, there's more. There's more in this dirt pod than there are in a jar. Yes. Shoot. Actually, no, because the jar has 3 total grams, and this dirt pod is only 1 total gram. So I don't know. Probably not. But either way, yeah, I've kind of second batch I've done on these guys. They work really, really well, and these are kind of cool because they're rechargeable, which I've never had to recharge one.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
they're yeah, nice. But they're also temperature controlled, so I can change the voltage. Cool. Yeah, through an app on my phone. Like this got a little thing that plugs in and it makes it, I guess, Bluetooth.
Huh.
And
you can do those yourself? Is that like at home or what?
Yep, fully. Yeah, I got the. You're gonna laugh at this. Hold on. Give me half.
Because I don't think I've ever made one at home.
A cart?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. All my friends and whatnot are asking me to, but I don't think I've ever done it.
Oh,
this typically scares people when I show it to them.
No, I understand that. No, I understand that completely.
But it's an injector for turp carts. And you can still see that I left a little bit in there. But
what do you do? How do you get your product to the right consistency?
So that's the crashing part, right? And let me put this down and put it back before I spill the rest of what's.
Yeah.
You running around there with that.
He's just gonna have big drips on the desk.
Yeah, I fell on it. I injected myself. It's so good. No, the terp.
Terp injections.
Probably not a good thing. Probably don't do that. Definitely don't do that. So yeah, it's a matter of very much strain dependent. It's a matter of crashing out the terp or crashing out the THCA and trying to leave behind the terpene. So basically, what I do is I take a jar of extract, I gently seal it up. And once it's at the right purge level, I'll call it, which has to do with viscosity. And again, each strain is different. So get it to that viscosity, gently seal it up, and then wait. And I put it in my vacuum oven, which doesn't have a vacuum oven or a vacuum attached to it. It's just really an oven. Throw it in there. And I wait, and sometimes it's typically like 75 degrees. If I need to like push something faster, I will go up to 85, but I never hit 90 or above because that is the temperature I recover my solvent at in terms of a hot water bath. So I know that my solvent inside of my closed loop system is never hitting 90 degrees. Unless I was really to boil it down to nothing, inside that water bath, which I don't. So knowing that, I try never to hit 90 degrees because I don't want to get it any higher than it's been in my closed loop system, I guess. So again, somewhat liquid, it's going to be at a different temperature anyway. So I seal it up, put it in there, and wait. That THCA will crash out and creates this layer at the bottom of the vessel. And sometimes they form a little bit differently. Sometimes they form in separate individual rocks to start. Sometimes it forms in like a thin sheet at the bottom of these little itty bitty tiny crystals. But eventually, if you've done it right, you'll get THCA forming on the bottom. And what's left on the top after a certain amount of time is a high terpene extract. It's not just terpenes. It's still going to be like 40 to 50+% THCA probably, or maybe a little bit even THC at that point. I would have to go back in my tests and see.
Now, that's where I was going to get at with the rosin.
There's probably a couple percentage points in there for sure of converted, THC at that point. But once you've got it crashed out enough, that's when you have to separate it. So you have to separate the terpenes out from the diamonds or the THCA. And usually I just use a stainless steel screen and just pour it, into a different clean vessel. In that different clean vessel, I now have my high terpene extract. I will usually, if I'm going to carts, I'll usually put it in for another round of crashing and try to get it as stable as possible. Because what I don't want to happen is it to come into a cart and then you know, take half a dab or half a day's worth of dabs or something, and just the heat of the cart has started converting crystals in it. So that's why sometimes on that second batch I'll turn it up to 85 degrees and try to quickly over the course of, you know, a day or a couple days or whatever, try to crash out anything that's left. Again, it's sealed, so it's, you know, trying to keep all the VOCs and everything inside, and quite frankly using that as a method for crystallizing as well. And once I'm satisfied with the consistency and the stability of that high terpene extract, that's when it goes into the cart. So again, I'd strain it.
So right from the strainer into your gun there.
Yep, into the gun. It takes, I think, 25 grams or 25 milliliters worth. And then the gun itself has it's a trigger pull, and that trigger pull has settings for 0.5 gram, 1 gram, or 2 gram per pull. So you just, you know, stick it in, pull it, stick it in, pull it, stick it in, you know.
That's awesome.
Pretty simple. Yeah. And it actually comes with, I have it here somewhere, but I haven't ever needed to use it. It comes with a wrap that wraps around that needle portion, because with distillate and some other extracts, you actually need to keep it heated, and you might need to do this with some rosin too. And so once you get it in there, if you need to keep it at 85, 90, 120 degrees, whatever it needs to be at, you can use this e-nail that's attached to this wrap that's you know, and just set it to it. It's kind of cool. But again, I
pretty awesome.
Tried it once and realized I don't need it, because if I just leave that gun like this instead of like this, it's just gonna start pouring out of that needle eventually, because it's that viscous usually.
Oh man, does that throw off your measurements at all, or is it still, or how do you fill it? You have to, like, you're saying if you lean it over it, it starts dripping. So when you're filling,
it has before, and that's like when I was heating it. When I had it the first time when I heated it, it was literally just pouring out. It depends on the viscosity. This Clementine one, I think if I just left it like that, like for example, this Clementine batch filling these carts, I didn't really have any drips in between. I had maybe one drip I had to clean up, right? Some of them, like Lime Skunk maybe is an example where it might get a little bit thinner, right? Where I got to work quick, you know what I mean? Otherwise it becomes a mess. And I talked to someone recently actually that was filling rosin carts, and he said for him it was just an absolute shit show. It's just like just a mess everywhere. I mean, do you guys? I guess it's you guys already after the decarb process, so it's already viscous at that point, right? You know, do you have to keep it warm when you're filling rosin carts?
I mean, keeping it warm is going to potentially, depending on the oil, ease your application. But keeping it too warm is going to be problematic.
Right.
It's going to make it too viscous, you know.
So like maybe just slightly above room temperature, we're talking?
Depending on the oil.
Okay.
But yeah, generally, yes. I've just never played with it much here at home. You guys are making me want, you know.
Yeah.
I'm
we did it a few times. I failed a few times, had a few that worked, but this was 4 years ago. You know, I didn't have a lot of process to go on, so I was just making shit
guy
up.
that always has a dab brief with him.
I mean, it's a pretty sizable hit on this thing.
Yeah, no, it looks it. Yeah, oh, you're making me jealous.
Those
little fucking pod systems are so much. Just I don't know. They're cleaner looking than the goddamn old vape cart. You know.
I mean, this is for sure like the sleekest one. I've got a lot of different examples or samples still to try. Like even was it the 510 thread, right?
Right.
I started with those, and those aren't the rechargeables. They're made to be stuck on like, one of these types of deals, a loose battery or whatever. And I kept, by the time I came around to having another live resin terp cart that I made, I had lost my last 510 battery. So it's like every time I wanted one of these things, I had to go buy another battery anyway. It's like, all right, at that point, okay, then the rechargeables make sense because maybe it's even less that you're using. I mean, this definitely feels heavier than this thing does, and this thing has a gram of concentrate in it. Not that that's a lot of weight, obviously, but
the pen ones always make me giggle.
Why?
I don't know if I should go into that. They
Please.
just make me giggle.
Are you talking like the cold?
Is what I think of.
The what? The pen, like the one in your what was your right hand?
The yellow?
pen. Yeah, that one.
So this is actually a hot knife.
Oh, that's a horrible thing.
But
those things are fun too, honestly, because they can have the application for sure.
Yeah, it's a gift. I think it's Rosin Dabber. I'm hoping I'm getting that name right on Instagram. He's just gifted me that. But I know are you talking about the ones that with like the coils? Or are you talking about because you can get a 510? You're talking about an actual pod, right? The cart.
No, I'm talking about just a straight pen with the cart, or with the cart.
Why do those make you giggle? You're talking about versus like something like a rechargeable?
Yeah, like that wouldn't make me not giggle. You're making me giggle now, you fucker, because I feel like I'm on trial.
What's your problem with 510 thread, man?
It makes me giggle.
It's just like old school. It feels old school.
Yeah, I don't know. I've just never been a fan of it.
Yeah.
I know there's the application, because there's times that, busting out a rig is just a pain in the ass. But I'm just a rig guy. Those things always make me cough a lot. So for me to get around that, I mean, and as a serious answer, for me to get around that, I make my rosin caps, where I take rosin, whether it be good rosin or, I should take some of this good rosin and try it sometime. But I generally take my food grade, rosin and decarb that completely into an oil, to an oil consistency. And then I mix it to whatever ratio I want with the coconut oil, generally 50-50. And man, I take 2 or 3 of those. You guys will see me at the end of these shows. When I take 2 or 3 of those some bitches. And then that just keeps me, if I want to go somewhere that, I want to be medicated, but I don't have the availability to smoke, well, then I take my caps.
Yeah, that's what the pens are for me. They're just convenient.
Sure.
I like the new little pens are way better than the big long. Looks like you're smoking.
You have a smoking cessation though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that definitely matters.
Pre-rolls and carts. I mean, this is when distillate carts are big, but pre-rolls and maybe still the case. Pre-rolls and carts are the most widely purchased items because of the convenience.
They really are
what people want.
They really, really are.
And they honestly are. In generally speaking, they're 2 of the most bottom of the barrel products when it comes to distillate pens and to most pre-rolls, because most pre-rolls are just your bottom of the barrel shake as it is,
Yeah, and they're buying the cheapest.
Yeah, so when people get a good pre-roll, a good hash hole, a good fucking live resin terp cart or rosin cart, that's it's like, whoa.
It's crazy at Eden here. This isn't me putting in an ad, but at the place I work for, let's go like that, the place I subcontract for, they make the rosin carts out of 73 to 159 rosin.
That's awesome.
So it kind of surprises me when they do it, and the carts sell like hot cakes, but yeah, it kind of surprises me that they use such high quality rosin. But I mean,
they probably have enough of it,
definitely have enough.
And they could probably sell more of it in pens than they can in just jars of hash.
Sure, so. Yeah. With the batter, not
price,
a lot
right?
of people. What's that?
It's probably got a premium price on it though too, over the other pens.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, they get that That
For
bougie
sure.
We
market,
could move
right?
more premium product. Yeah, I mean, it's just another step.
Absolutely.
They
Yeah,
have to take to
the
do that.
batter doesn't seem to move. Well, doesn't seem. It just doesn't move as fast as the carts. Yeah, the carts.
Mhm.
Simple
So,
convenience, man. Hey, I do encourage you to try throwing some of that rosin in your edibles. These my most recent batch of this peppermint bark, the 250 milligram, is the one
mhm.
I used the live resin in, and it's good. It's good.
We've talked about it before. I really like those terps, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like so there's got to be enough. There's got to be enough in order. I mean, I guess because I'm not a hell of a big snacker and whatnot, and I think Spartan had talked about this before when we were talking last week. How do you take your medicine? Well, you take it in a capsule, But that's the fun thing about cannabis and the way we use and process it is that we can infuse things and can enjoy it in different ways based on our interests, And we can choose to
Yep.
we can smoke it, we can vaporize it, we can infuse products with it, we can extract it and decarb the oil and eat it straight.
Oh, that's another show we got to start, and that's called options. That's the sus show, the after show, the freaking Patreon.
Oh, that's
Man,
funny.
you guys got me ripped tonight over here. I think I took a
So I
dab
was-
at just about every
I was
jar of rosin I
Playing
had.
around here
Oof.
and stumbled upon some
Ooh.
really awesome macro photography. That
Damn, who's doing that?
this
Holy
is Zoom
smokes.
Gardens,
Oh yeah,
Oh, bit.
and their
yeah.
stuff
Zoom
is
Gardens has got some great
absolutely
stuff.
That's sexy, dude.
Look at that. Hold on. Go back to. I
That's
know this isn't the
beautiful.
Zoom photo, but that one in the center at the top with the roots, the plant, the actual plant, is like pretty much at the top.
Oh yeah.
Right there. What the heck is going on there? That's kind of cool.
What in God's name is that growing in?
Yeah, no, great photography, great, just incredible
Yeah.
stuff, man.
But it's
Dude, some of those
I mean,
pictures. Forward that to me, dude. Some of those pictures are really turning me. That's really. I could look
that
at that.
insane.
It's hash porn, guys. I mean, intact
It
hash porn.
really is.
Look at those anthocyanins,
Dude,
crawling up
when
those stalks.
when I got in close to my primal punch this year,
Double bubble. Sorry.
Oh, nice.
Look
When
at
I
that.
got in, it looks like two boobies. When I looked at my primal before I washed it, I noticed that it had very, very long, skinny stalks. Pretty much the entire plant. I mean, not the entire plant, almost every single stalk. So when I processed it, and I mean, like when I did my half dry and then I did my buck and then put it in the freezer and whatnot, I was very gentle because I assumed that they were very brittle, and even in taking them out of the freezer and putting them in the water, I still assumed that they were super brittle. But man, it ended up being questionably, and I think I got to put some more away for myself. It's probably the best rosin, some of the best rosin I've ever made, and
Really?
I think it's because
awesome.
of that long stalk, meaty head, and it was just made it so brittle so that the collection was so much easier,
Was that like the bud structure also kind of in your
Yes.
favor? Yeah.
That plant, I mean, that we can go in a whole other story with that plant. We got 5 minutes here, but it went into like a re-veg it grown outdoors, and I've grown it outdoors a couple different times. But it went into like a re-veg state, and it kind of became a mess because it, at a certain bud site, it becomes like 6 or 7 fucking different, branches that come from there, and it's an absolute nightmare of a mess. But then, yes, the buds, I look for big, obviously, if you can, but more airy, because we've talked about that. I want that. So generally the buds, it's funny, generally the buds that I would kind of look for, except for some, there's a lot of exceptions, would be a one that's airy and generally, like if I got a foxtaily one, that would potentially be a very good.
Just a lot of exposed trichome coverage,
which wouldn't be necessarily
more surface area, more pathways.
Bag appeal is what I was getting at, as far as flower goes.
It's like atmospheric exposure and purging things, or exposing the extracts or the solvents really to the atmosphere to purge them. But kind of similar concept, I guess. I wish my lime skunk and my clementine weren't as, I guess, greasy as the problem, because that bud structure is great for that. The terps are insane. It's just too greasy. Is there a way to combat that, or make it worthwhile? Or I'm like, do you have to operate at like somehow extremely lower temperatures or something?
Are we talking rosin?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
yeah,
bubble extraction. Yeah.
So the whole process. So it's just cold. It's just trying to keep it as cold as possible. That's your only thing we're going to combat with it.
Okay.
Cold rooms, cold.
Yep.
Dude, I'm telling you, Spear, I got to make a trip up in like February, and we're just going to do it. I'm going to bring my snowsuit and my winter boots.
I got Miss Bud's got me heated long underwear. I just put battery in it and they're Bluetooth, and it just
Bluetooth. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh, it's perfect.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
But remember, I'm manual wash now, so that keeps you warm too. Just stirring the paddle.
For sure.
That's true.
Hey man, I'll bring my kayak paddle. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll tell you, Pedro, when I first started just sitting there while the washer did the work, I froze my butt off.
I walk out of the room a lot.
Yeah. I had to start going in.
I know someone else that walks out a lot too.
Yo, that freaking, I have some ice cream Snickers bar in the freezer that sounds super good right now.
Those are definitely like one of the best ice cream options.
I hope they're still there.
I like butter pecan ice cream. I don't know why. It's really good. I like pecans.
I think about half of the viewers are about to
dig into their freezer.
Hey, before we just dump everybody like we have been the last couple of weeks, let's let them know that we understand that there is no intro and outro yet, and then when we shut the stream off, it really just like run into a brick wall, just don't. But we're working on it. Yeah, we know we're working on it. So
well, and hey guys, turn on autoplay. Make sure you subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. That'll help. And tell your friends. Variables Podcast every Friday night
again next week,
11 p.m. Eastern time. It's Pedro, Superior Buds, and Frigoli. Do we want to leave one a clip here? Do you guys have any like noisemakers we can just like outro? Just like bugs are great.
Yeah,
some bugs like bugs. Variables.
Oh, it didn't play.
I don't know. That sounded good.
Bye guys.